Hello, all of my grots and gits. Welcome back to Happy Crumpet Wargaming. Today, we are going to go through who is truly the biggest and the bestest in the Orcs Codex. So we're talking about my two favorite special characters from the current Index Hammer that we are moving through. And there's a lot of questions about how usable these guys are. And the nice thing is that they're both quite usable and they're both quite good. And they're both pretty dang big and they're both pretty dang the bestest. So we got to figure out who is the biggest and the bestest, and that's what we're going to do today in our head. Who's going to win? We're also going to be talking about our tactics of how to field these guys and exactly how we're going to run them up the battlefield. I'll show you on GTS actually how they move, and hopefully that should be really, really useful for everyone. If you like this content, please smash the like and subscribe button, and we're going to keep it coming every single day, kind of. Sometimes, like this past weekend, I was traveling, so I couldn't make any videos, but I've got videos every day this week, and let's get into it. All right, so the Prophet of Ghaz and Mozrog. So what does this guy give us? He is 235 points, and he's a leader for Meganobs. Now, most of you guys know I'm not super hot on Meganobs. I certainly don't think they're useless. They just serve kind of a purpose of not dying, which is kind of hard in this meta when there's a lot of like anti-infantry out there. But they are fairly tough, so I don't think the Meganobs suck. The fact that Ghaz has to attach to Meganobs and he can't choose to attach to like boys does hamper him a little bit, but Meganobs are not necessarily bad. Now, what he does do is he gives +1 to hit and +1 to wound to his unit. And this is a really, really nice thing because this guy freaking slaps. And he will basically hit and wound everything in the game on 2s. And don't forget that he also gets the exploding 6s. And for 1 CP, you can give them their Unbridled Carnage to make them explode on 5s. So he and his unit together actually is a lot of value. So for the purposes of this video, we're actually going to talk about him versus Mozrog. Not him and his unit versus Mozrog. But I will give him the +1 to hit and wound because you're always going to run him with his unit. Okay, here's the deal, guys. He's infantry now, and this is freaking amazing because what that means is you can actually move through walls. So you can deploy him very safely and just advance him up the table relatively safe because he's not going to be able to be picked out. So even if he could be picked out, he's going to be attached to a unit, so you're not really going to be able to target him. And if you are able to target him, well, good luck because you're going to have to get into position, and then you're going to have to kill his unit before you get to him. Precision won't kill him. He's got too many wounds. So you don't have to worry about precision. A Vindicator Assassin could like mess him up for a little bit, but they're also not going to kill him. Okay, cool. So Makari's model, which is included in Ghaz, because it's kind of a weird situation for 235 points. You get both Ghaz and Makari. Makari actually in the WA is going to give everyone within 12 inches of him lethal hits. This is exceptionally powerful when coupled with Beast Snaggas. So even though Beast Snaggas aren't necessarily going to be run with Ghaz, they're going to be run adjacent to Ghaz. So that Makari is going to be giving them lethal hits. Then you run the unit of Snaggas into a vehicle or monster or some kind of nasty. Suddenly they get full hit rerolls, exploding on 6s, and 6s are also lethal hits. That is pretty awesome, especially when coupled with the stratagem of Unbridled Carnage. Because if you guys don't know, Unbridled Carnage is here. I'm just going to read it to you because it's pretty freaking sick. One Orcs unit from your army that has not been selected to fight this phase. Until the end of the phase, each time an Orcs model in this unit makes a melee attack, an unmodified hit roll of 5 up becomes a critical hit. What does that mean? Well, if you use Unbridled Carnage on a unit of Beast Snaggas that are being affected by sustained hits and being affected by lethal hits, suddenly they're getting full wound rerolls against that monster or vehicle, and 5s are both exploding and auto woundings. So a third of their hits are just going to auto wound the vehicle, and they're going to explode. So they're actually going to do crazy amount of damage just from the fact that you have Ghaz and Makari pretty close by. And I think that's really important for us to talk about. So he is a huge force multiplier. So he's just very efficient. He makes his entire retinue more efficient. And also, this is actually a pretty cool thing. They can benefit from the Here We Go to make them a little bit faster, which is also pretty dang dope. So that's Ghaz. Ghaz is pretty awesome. I think in the tier list, we voted him a B. And that's because he does have some really great utilities. But you're certainly not going to be running him at every list just because he is a big point cost. And the meta is going to need to develop a little bit. But he is quite good, and I like him a lot. I think you might see people tech into him a little bit more often, but he's certainly not necessary for a successful Orcs list, but he's pretty freaking great. So that's Gork, that's the Prophet of Gork and Mozrog. Let's talk about the next dude. We got Mozrog Scragbad, and more importantly, we've got Big Champa. All right, so Mozrog, this guy is a total tank. He's 195 points, so he is going to be a full 40 points cheaper than Ghaz and Makari. And he does not, he's not a leader, so he is a solo monster now. This is kind of a little annoying because now that he's a monster, even when he's in melee, you can still shoot him, albeit at -1 hit. But he does hit quite hard, specifically against vehicles and monsters, and he's okay-ish into infantry. Now, the thing about this legend is he is insanely tough. He is one of the tougher models. I know a Transcendent Satan Shard is tougher than him. A Warrior block of 20 warriors is tougher than him. But there's not many things in the game tougher than him. He is a total tank. He's got toughness 10. He's got 9 wounds. He has a 4-up invuln and a 4-up Feel No Pain. Now, a 4-up Feel No Pain is so much better than the -1 damage that they used to be, because a 4-up Feel No Pain cuts all damage in half, not just damage 2 in half. So it's a really, really big deal. This guy's super, super tough. He's an incredible target for the Tough as Nails stratagem. Remember, Tough as Nails makes one orc model that's not a vehicle or a Gretchen unit -1 to wound. So we love this guy. On top of all that, he can be healed by a pain boss for 3 wounds every single turn. And that is so powerful, because when he does actually take damage, he's going to heal. And that's freaking awesome. Now, he doesn't have a retinue, and he is a monster, so he can't move through walls like Ghaz can, but he does have a lot of uses. So let's talk about some damage. Let's talk about some damage and output. Let's talk about Ghaz first. Ghaz, I'm not going to include his retinue for this, but I am going to include his +1 to hit and wound, because he will be leading a retinue. But I want to try to keep this as pure a comparison as possible, even though there will be a few challenges. So Ghaz, on average, by himself, with the +1 to hit and wound, in the WA, is going to be 9 damage into Terminators on average. And then he's going to be 16.7 damage into a Big Knight on average. So those are actually pretty dang good numbers. Now, Mozrog, he does not necessarily do as much damage as Ghaz, but when you combine both his Big Choppa and Big Choppa and Gut Rippa, which is his weapon, and remember, you can attack with both because Big Choppa has the extra weapons or extra attacks keyword, you're going to have 9.3 damage on average into those Terminators. And then you are also going to be having 13.3 damage into a Big Knight. This is a lot. He is a good bit cheaper than Ghaz, and he hits almost as hard. That is pretty dang impressive. So what you'll find is that this guy smacks. This guy absolutely smacks. Yeah, so that is going to be their damage profile. And when we look at their PPP, and if you guys know what PPP is, it's essentially their trading value. So it's like how many points of the unit is required to kill X amount of points to another unit. So Ghaz, he has a 1.9 into Terminators. Essentially what that means is he's going to cost about twice as much as the amount of Terminators he's going to kill in an activation. That's more or less how that will translate. And then, in order for him to go into a Knight, he's going to cost a little bit less than what the actual cost of the Knight that he killed was. So a 0.8 is excellent. A 1.9 is totally acceptable and fairly decent. Mozrog's PPP gets a little bit confusing because he's got the extra attacks from Big Choppa. So if you only do Gut Rippa, which is his close combat weapon, into Terminators, it's going to be 3.1, which is not good. And Big Choppa is a 3.2. And that's not good either. But when you combine the two, you're going to get a much more pure form. And I'm not entirely sure how to do the calculations for it. Sorry, we're dog sitting right now. We have a few termagants running around here. So when you combine those two, it's not as pure as saying, oh, well, you just divide them by 2 because it becomes a 1.5. But it is significantly better than both of the numbers. So just kind of look at the damage profile to kind of give yourself a little bit of a hint of how solid it is. Okay, let's talk about survivability. Survivability is a really big deal when it comes to the orcs. Ghaz, he's T6, 10 wounds, 4-up invuln. This guy also comes with a retinue that you're going to have to chew through, unless you're running him solo, which is kind of how we're doing this comparison video. So let's say we have a very killy unit that's going into him. And one of the killier units in the game right now is Desolators. So let's put the Desolators. Now this is only the super cracks, not including the Castellan launchers. We're going to have 10 Desolators with super cracks, shooting right into Ghaz. And we are making it so that these guys are the Oath of the Moment target. So they get full rerolls to hit and full rerolls to wound. I also included a Librarian with the Desolators just to make them extra killy, so you guys can understand just how much damage these guys can soak. And so that means that they're going to be exploding on 5 ups. All right, so if you have 10 Desolators, and they are shooting Ghaz. Remember, this does not include Makari, and this does not include his retinue. That's just because the mathematics get really hard when you have to kill Makari first. That's just a little too challenging for my meager mathematical skills to calculate. On average, those 10 Desolators are going to be killing Ghaz, one model worth of Ghaz 40% of the time. 2 models worth of Ghaz 39% of the time. 3 models worth of Ghaz 11% of the time. Now, this is a little bit tricky. They are both going to be calculated with a -1 to wound from Artist Nail. So I did give them a -1 to wound here. But the full wound rerolls, Ghaz is going to die. If you include some models from his retinue, meaning your Meganobs, I don't exactly know how much tougher it gets, but the cost of the unit also goes up a bunch. So to keep it as pure a comparison as possible, this is what it is. On average, those 10 Desolators are going to be dealing 22.5 damage to Mr. Ghaz. Now let's look at Mozrog. All right, so Mozrog is T10 with a 4-up invuln, with a 4-up Feel No Pain, and he has the ability to heal. When you target him, you also use the -1 to wound strat. Their average damage is only 8.3, which means that a unit of 10 Desolator Marines with full rerolls to hit, full rerolls to wound, and a 5-up exploding hits, they're not killing Mozrog. As a matter of fact, 60% of the time, they're not killing anything. You'll get one dead model 36% of the time, and 2 dead models 2% of the time, and that's just never going to happen. Remember, this also doesn't include caveats like, well, I'm going to spend a CPU to re-roll one of the failed save rolls for Mozrog. This doesn't account for things that I would do that with Ghaz as well. But as you can see just by the numbers, Mozrog is way tougher, like way tougher than Mr. Ghaz is. So just keep that in mind. Now let's talk about usability a little bit. They are challenging, and they're challenging in different ways. Mr. Ghaz, he's quite vulnerable on his own, but you can grab the retinue. And the retinue is kind of a big deal when it comes to Ghaz. So one other amazing thing is that this guy is actually infantry, so he's going to be running straight through buildings at his enemies. And he can deploy via transport. So if you really wanted to, you can put him in a battle wagon and have him deploy 3 inches away from the battle wagon, and then move up the tabletop. And that is a very valid strategy. Mozrog's a monster, so now buildings are a problem for him, but they were a problem for him last edition. However, due to the new edition, now he can walk over his own troops, because you can move through your own models now. That is actually a very big deal, and it actually helps a ton. So it does make monsters and cavalry in general just more usable in this edition. So those are the way that we're going to use them. Now what I want to do is I'm going to switch over to the TTS view so that you guys can kind of see how I'm going to actually be running these guys up the tabletop. Boom. Oh, TTS. Here we go, baby. All right, so I put a few Eldar units down here. So we've got like a Falcon over here, a Fire Prism over here, and an Avatar of Cain. How are we going to get these? So I'm going to do these units one at a time. We got Mr. Mozrog on his big chopper right here. Look how pretty this man is. He's a legend. And then right next to him, we have the Prophet of Ghaz and Mozrog, Mr. Ghaz, Cool Mechar Tracker himself, looking like a legend. Okay, so Mr. Ghaz, he can deploy right here behind the wall very safely, because now he just walks straight through the wall. So let's just say he's going to want to go towards this Falcon. Well, at the beginning of the game, let's go ahead and pop, or let's just say that we're in the wall phase. And let's say that we really desperately want to get him to this Falcon. So let's go ahead and pop the stratagem. Here we go, which is going to give him +2 to his advance, +2 to his charge. So let's go and roll his advance roll. Boom, he rolls a 1. Luckily, we used here we go. So he's going to be advancing 3 inches, which means he'll move 8 inches. Boom. So he just walks straight through the wall, and that's actually quite nice. Now he's going to have to roll probably a 9-inch charge, which is a 7-inch with here we go. Mr. Mozrog, if he wanted to do the same, it's going to be a bit of a problem. You actually can't start him here, because now he's going to have to spend 5 inches coming this way, then he'll go 5 inches this way, and then you could roll his advance. All right, so he goes 5. So even with a much better advance, and let's say we ear-we-go'd him as well, which I don't remember if you actually can, but let's just say he did. Even if you ear-we-go'd him as well, and with a much better advance, it's going to be a much harder charge for Mozrog to get into. Actually, it's going to be impossible for him to get into the Falcon, and Ghaz still can, even with a much worse advance. And that's just the power of being able to run through a wall. So Mozrog has to be deployed a little bit differently than Ghaz, which means Mozrog's not going to be as safe when you deploy him. Let's take this example over here as well. So right here, we can have Mr. Ghaz, Cool Mechar Tracker hidden behind the wall fairly well. This Falcon's holding this point. So let's say he rolled that 1 for his advance again. So we're going +2 because because he's got the here we go strat on him. Now suddenly we've got a 5, maybe even a 6. Yeah, like a 5-inch charge into the Falcon. Then we're going to have Big Champa or Mozrog in the exact same slot. So Mr. Mozrog Scragbad, this is actually a much better position for him if you're trying to get him into combat because he's just going to move right here. So that's going to be a 4-inch movement, which gives him 6 inches of movement left, and then his advance, which is going to be minimum 3. So minimum he's moving 9 inches if you're using the strat on him. So let's say he goes there. That gives him a 3-inch charge. So as you can see, both of these are really usable, and you just have to place them very differently. Mozrog has to come over here. You can't start him right here, whereas Ghaz is more flexible. You can start him here. You can start him here. You could also start him here, and in your first turn, just advance him up and hide him right here, because it's actually going to be quite challenging for the enemy to draw lines of sight. They can't see him from here. The only place they're going to be able to see him from is here. They can't see through here. They certainly can't see over here. So he's actually very well staged, and then next turn he can easily charge through here and then get the charge that he or move straight through here and get the charge that he wants. So Ghaz is a little bit more flexible with his placement. Now it does get a little tricky when you add his retinue of Meganobs, because when you do that, suddenly his I guess portfolio, you would say, is much larger, and it's a little bit easier to draw line of sight to the unit. So Mozrog is a little more restricted in where you can place him. So I will absolutely give a big advantage to Mr. Ghazcool when it comes to placing on the battlefield like this. Also, one other thing to consider is that both of these units can be targets of rapid ingress. The rapid ingress stratagem is freaking amazing. Let me show you how we would do that. So let's go and show a area denial. Not area denial, show strat reserves. Now, they can't come in via deep strike just because they can't come in via deep strike. But if you want to strat reserve them, you can strat reserve Mr. Ghazcool right here in your opponent's turn after your opponent has finished moving. So in your turn, he can then come over here, his 5 inches, or let's say you spend it on the CP for him to advance, so he goes minimum 8, and then then he'll actually absolutely charge through here, no problem. Let's do the same thing with Mr. Mozrog. Let's say we spent 1 CP for a rapid ingress. All right, we're probably going to put him maybe more a little bit like here. And then he's going to go ahead and move his 10 inches plus 3 for his minimum advance. We're assuming that this is the Wa turn. Boom. Nice. And then that makes it a very easy charge. So they're both actually very fantastic candidates for the rapid ingress stratagem, and I would keep that in mind when you're using them. A lot of times rapid ingress is the way to use these dudes. So that was how I'm going to be running them up the board with TTS. Let's go back to the PowerPoint and finish this dang video up. Let's decide who is the biggest and the best. Boom, boom, boom. All right, guys. The moment is about to be revealed. Who is the biggest and the best? Are we ready? I'm nervous. Are you nervous? And the reveal is Mozrog. Mozrog Scragbag is the biggest and the bestest of this index. It doesn't mean that he's the biggest and the bestest of the entire codex. We'll have to see how it goes. Guys, I'm not like saying Ghaz sucks. I think Ghaz is actually awesome, and he has a great place in the armies. I think he's going to be very, very usable. But as of right now, Mr. Mozrog is a freaking Chad. This dude's T10, -1 to wound, 4 up feel no pain, 4 up invuln. You can heal him. He is a total badass. He can run into your monsters and your vehicles. He can smack them. He can soak Overwatch like a legend. You can rapid ingress him to get him into really interesting spots. And all these arguments are made for Ghazcool as well, but at a cost of 195 points, this dude is value town for our current codex. The only thing that I would like to see him improve on is Gut Ripper needs to be AP2 instead of AP1. AP1 is a little bit of a problem for him, because if your opponent suddenly just uses a strat to make them, -1 AP, Armor of Contempt or whatever like that, that's a really big problem. But for right now, Mozrog gets my vote for the biggest and the best. I would love to hear what you have to say. If you disagree, type it on down into the comments. I understand that Ghaz can do more damage and he might be a little bit maneuverable, but remember, he is 40 points more base. And if you want to really make him better, you have to have him attached to Meganobs for that +1 to hit and wound, which would require an extra 65 points on top of the 40, which makes it a bare minimum extra 105 points for Ghaz plus 2 Meganobs. So that is a huge points investment to get the extra damage on him. So for now, everyone, Mozrog wins this edition of Who's the Biggest and the Best. Let me know what you think in the comments. Until next time, thank you so much for your attention. And we will be back tonight, actually, with a new tier video for the Tyranids. So make sure to check that out. Love you all and hope you have an amazing day.